So I made an 8-hour video essay a bit back and folks were like, I'm not watching that, which I get. Well, I stand by that video's length for its thoroughness and sheer ungodly amounts of evidence with thorough explanations and intensive detail to make sure to acknowledge any specifics, nuance, and potential counter-arguments. Now that that video is out, I can make a summary version that describes a lot of the strongest evidence and flash it on screen to prove it. And if you doubt me and want details to fact check or just see how crazy this all got, everything you need's in the big boy. Okay, firstly, why should you like NFTs? Because it's been really good for artists. This might sound weird because the overwhelming narrative you hear online, whether YouTube or Twitter, is that it isn't, and artists, especially small artists helped by NFTs, effectively don't exist. This is observably false. Go search foundation.app on Twitter, it gives you a short list of these artists. Click on some you like and check their sales to see that it can be very profitable, even for small artists. This one search from December 6th comes up with a bunch who have made sales recently, and it also comes up with a bunch who have sold a ton, and for a lot too, with new active bids right now. This holds true not just today when I release the video and ETH is up, this was true at the bottom of the market crash when this specific clip is from, in mid-June, July, where you could still find small artists with over 1k USD in total profits still getting active bids. Don't think I'm cherry picking, try it yourself. I did it for this video and in a single afternoon I found 25 different artists who at the time of the screen grabs were sub 1k followers and made over 1k USD in total profits, sometimes even with single pieces. Some in total had made multiple thousands, even up to 10k. These small artists not only prove the profitability of NFTs, but also are a strong counter-argument to them being all money laundering and wash trading because small artists do not have the upfront money to risk pumping thousands into the system to buy their own work, and looking at who buys them shows they often have their work bought by multiple different collectors who all have their own social media presence and vast collections from tons of other artists. A small artist being behind all this is absurd. It also makes no sense for, like, a drug dealer to be laundering money through these accounts. These thousands of artists and collectors are way too monetarily interwoven with each other and put in way too much effort to look like small-time artists happy to sell their work for this much to think a company hired an artist to sell their art for their own drug money so that the company has a cover for where it got it. Not only are small artists making high profits, mid-range and big artists are genuinely getting rich. There are literally artists who have 30k followers who have made $500,000. There are artists who used to do commission work like the one who did Ludwig's outro that are now millionaires. I show tons of artists who have made 10k, 20k, 30k, 100k in profits in only the 6 months or so that they've been making NFTs. Those 100k artists only started in October last year, because none of this was during the boom of NFTs. I took these screenshots a full year after in April of this year, just 2 months before the bottom of the market crash. Even at the bottom, things were admittedly less profitable, yes, but generally speaking, it was still miles better than commission work. I'm not going to pretend it's free money, there's definitely factors to consider, but it's very possible. You could find sub 10k accounts making 230, 800, 3,400 USD on single pieces at the bottom of the market crash. Mid-range artists, 4k, 3.5k, 20k USD on single pieces. And these artists have only been making more since. This small artist's last piece sold for over 10k. I also show you how big this has been for artists in developing countries. Brazil, Indonesia, Thailand, Malaysia. I show you testimonials of how good a decentralized currency really is in these places. I show you threads asking what these artists were making before versus now, which are crazy to read. There were artists in Thailand that were earning 5 USD per page of manga, now earning the equivalent of their life savings in their 20s per NFT. I also provide debunks for commonly cited stats to say artists don't profit from NFTs, as they have big issues. Like this one claims that most artists don't make money from NFTs, but its dataset literally comes from all of OpenSea with no attempt to separate what people typically think of as an artist from art thieves, shitty clip art trend following profile pic projects, automatic abstract computer AI pieces, shitty Photoshop memes with a filter, or anyone hamming something out in Paint or uploading a few photos off their camera trying to make a quick buck because they saw people sold a JPEG for 69 million and they think anyone will buy anything. All of this would exist in far greater numbers than who you're actually trying to study, so this stat conflates a giant chunk of bad data with quote-unquote artists. It also says many artists lose money on fees, but the site from the study doesn't have fees each time you mint an NFT, only a one-time account fee, and their data comes from a 10-day period right as the NFT scene started to explode, meaning a ton of people just joined and had 10 days to earn back their one-time account fee, or they would be considered unprofitable by the study. Even ignoring all that, this is still like saying YouTube is bad for creators because most people who tried to be one didn't make their money back on the required tools. There's no guarantee or college course, no barrier to entry, it's an artistic medium. Most folks who try to be artists fail in general. That's why I just show you how to find recent posts and sales by NFT artists so you can decide for yourself. Okay, but what about rampant art theft, you say? Art theft with NFTs is no worse than other industries. Just type art theft into Twitter search to get a list of recent cases and compare how many are NFT and how many are merch. If anything, it happens less than other forms of art theft. You only see so much NFT art theft because it's signal boosted and sensationalized, not because it actually happens more. This is backed up by specific cases too. The most well known is a dead artist having a single piece stolen for an NFT and put on a niche site and not even selling. But the same artist literally had multiple different pieces of art stolen by a whole company to sell on multiple pieces of merch on a mainstream site literally days after her death. And yet that got less coverage. This trend's everywhere in crypto too. You all know the cringy animations, but you've never heard of the good ones. And the sales and popularity for the stupid and scam projects crypto is known for is always dwarfed by the actual popular things people buy into that never get any coverage. In contrast, I show just how big normal art theft is if you're looking for it. There's stolen art on Amazon, in Sony ads, physical stores. The theft with NFTs are not outliers, it's probably less, which is exactly why folks always show DeviantArt's 80k cases of art theft total, but leave out that it scanned 3.8 million per week for 5 months. Okay, but what about the environment? You may hear one transaction with a proof-of-work blockchain is worth like 73 days worth of power for the average US household, but this is crazy fallacious because it makes it sound like each new transaction burns an extra 73 days of power, but it doesn't go up by transaction. These warehouses and sheds of computers, all competing to guess a number first, decides who gets the right to process the current pending transactions. It doesn't happen for each transaction. That's why any rundown of proof of work will say that solving the puzzle adds a block, not a transaction. Even an increase in transactions wouldn't mean extra blocks either, because they're added at a set rate by design. So this shit, the actual energy intensive thing, it doesn't do more of this with each transaction. In spite of this, the fallacious study that popularized the per transaction energy cost got it by calculating the average energy cost per block and then used average transactions per block to get a per transaction energy cost. Then they estimate how many transactions there would be in future and calculate it with their per transaction energy cost to get these world-ending figures that were cited by mainstream.
According to the journal Nature, Bitcoin's growth could single-handedly push global temperatures above the tipping point of 2 degrees Celsius.
This is all backed up by the rebuttals published in the same journal that published this study. They will tell you the same thing. Transaction number and energy cost have tenuous correlation, and calculating energy cost this way is inaccurate. They even criticize the original paper for suddenly changing how they themselves calculated it in previous papers, making their motive seem kinda dodge. You can also just look at the actual blockchain to see that there are a ton of small mining rigs that solve blocks, and yet there's no trend of low transaction numbers. If it was doing this for each transaction, no way would tiny rigs beat out these warehouses so often unless the blocks had small transactions. But nope, all average. By itself, the 73-day and world-ending prediction should raise red flags. Who's paying for this? There are transaction fees for users, but they're nowhere close to this, and while miners are rewarded with extra Bitcoin by the system for solving blocks, there is a cap on this, so it'll eventually stop. Who makes a currency where each transfer costs 73 days worth of power? That's dumb. This is all to say that if a new artist minted their first piece right now, they would be burning effectively no energy at all, because energy cost doesn't go up by transaction. The actual energy cost of proof of work is decided not by transactions, but by how valuable the coin is, and therefore how worth it is for miners to spend more money on energy to get that coin. The more valuable it is, the more it justifies larger energy cost. But for things like Bitcoin, the payout is halved every 4 years. So in order to get runaway growth, you would need continuous exponential growth in the coin's value every year, forever, which is unlikely. Just looking at Bitcoin's actual energy growth over the last few years shows this is dumb. The rebuttals also take issue with how they calculate the amount of CO2 produced in the first place, because they assume miners would keep their rigs on even when they'd be losing money on electricity costs. This and other factors result in recalculating CO2 electricity equivalent for 2017 from 69 megatons to 16 megatons. Also, industry surveys suggest that crypto uses 56% green energy anyway. This makes sense because crypto mining is very different from other industries, as it only needs an internet connection, so crypto mining is one of the few things that they can buy for cheap otherwise wasted energy. Like I showed this video from a crypto miner that had people fuming over his shed of computer parts whirring away. But he was just making use of wasted natural gas that was being flared because it was a safety hazard. You can literally see the flare turning off and the mining rig on. Now don't get me wrong, proof of work does use a fair chunk of energy per year. A small country's worth is actually true, but it's also true of most industries, and most use much more. That's why when detractors compare proof of work to other industries, they only use banks so they can compare on transactions rather than per year totals. Since it's not actually going up by transaction, it's a bad justification to kill prosperity for thousands of artists when you could just turn off your AC, as it's more energy intensive, which makes sense. Look at any graph of what consumes the most power in your house. Heating and cooling is huge, your computer is tiny, and a mining rig is just a single part of a computer. So if there are 1 million unique miners and the lowest end is 9 USB sticks and the highest is warehouses full of these little parts just sending little electric currents over and over, is this really enough energy to end the world? It makes sense why it's far less than other industries. It takes tons of energy to move and mine with heavy machineries, to process materials and take it to market, and workers to and from sites. Think about what's required to heat cold air and pump it into every home in the world. There's only 1 million of these, and all they do is spin a fan and send little electric currents over and over. It doesn't add up to world ending. And unlike an NFT artist making a transaction, your AC usage actually correlates with energy costs, so don't boycott an artist, turn off your AC. Finally, September 15th, Ethereum moved off proof of work anyway. Its energy use went from fair to near nothing. So maybe it doesn't hurt the environment, but isn't it all a scam? Aren't these guys just buying to get another to buy higher? There are folks like that, yes, but these scams and investors only appeared because of money already in the economy from a genuine type of customer who wants to buy and keep NFTs. You don't look at scalped or counterfeited autographs for sale and be like, scammers created a fake demand for a paper with names on it just to scam folks. Obviously, autographs were a desirable collectible first, and that attracted the scams. So what's the evidence NFTs are desirable collectibles too? Well, in my video I show tons of NFT folks talking like money isn't the motivator. Collectors make digital galleries to display their pieces. They write about what they like about pieces they bought. Even with profile pic projects, there's tons of talks about things like trait matching. They do it with ones they buy, they sometimes even do it with ones they don't. I've seen collectors talk in detail for every piece they buy and even do it for entries to art competitions they ran for fan art of their NFTs. This guy did this for over 400 entries. He didn't even own half of these. I've seen these competition hosts boost the prize pool just because the value of ETH dropped. I've seen folks buy the non-winning entries even if they don't own what it's fan of. Many collectors talk casually with artists and ask each other about their collections. Many collectors have separate secure hardware wallets called vaults just for holding, and one look at their transaction history shows they don't sell anything even though they have huge collections. If this was for reselling, you'd expect high turnover. They're clearly collectors. They even do scholarships for new artists. They just give them mint money, no strings. There are plenty of folks here, and even popular comedians who are both fans of NFTs, yet not above making fun of or criticizing anyone or anything in the space.
Oh, how cool, my grandma sent me a cat video. Wait, I'm not clicking that link. Bro, she knows better. She knows not to send me a link. My grandma's trying to rug me.
Folks even openly criticize NFT games they play despite having invested in them. God's sakes, I've seen them tattoo their arm with their ape. You think he's reselling? They make memes about regretting not accepting offers because it was their identity, and to this day refuse offers despite being twice their buy-in. I've seen folks who have sold their profits say months later, I missed them. There's tons more in the big boy, but the point is, many here do not talk or act like scammers or investors. It's far more reasonable to assume they're just weird collector types. Now often you all don't get collectibles that aren't physical and are easily copied on a surface level, but this isn't essential for collectors. Most collections don't make sense to everyone else, and games like TF2, CSGO, and Gacha prove a demand for digital collectibles. Also, the price discrepancy between original famous baseball cards and their reprints prove collectors don't care if a collectible simply looks the same at a surface level, and will go to great lengths to prove they have the authentic original rather than just a reprint, even busting out a microscope to tell the difference despite no one else caring or being able to tell in any practical setting. This implies the fun of collecting is a pride from feeling you have the quote authentic version of something you're personally invested in, which lines up with being able to click on a hexagon profile to check the NFT is from the perceived authentic source rather than a copy-paste. Okay, so NFTs look more like collecting than scams, but it's also hypebeast as well. Don't believe me? Both sell for way more than the cost of materials and labor, both have limited release drops and artificially scarce products that people seem to want because they're scarce.
Yo, I'm so stoked I picked up these dunks, bro. You like these?
I don't really mess with dunks, bro.
Dude, you don't like dunks? These are crazy and they're so limited.
Huh? Limited? How limited, bro? These are actually pretty fire, bro. How much? I'll buy it off you.
Both even call it a drop, both wake up for and wait crazy hours for drops, both have scalpers and investors that resell.
I got my stuff, I'm locked and loaded, you know. You need the ornament? Bruh, I got it, bruh. It's going for like $40, but I got you $100 right now, bro. You need this.
Both market with celebrities, both love flexing, both are featured on things like hypebeast.com, both fixate on the real thing, despite how both can be copied/counterfeited, both have overlap with collectors, many have sneaker walls, none of which they take outside, both can sell anything as long as they're the authentic brand, even if it's a brick, or as in my video, this popular artist I talked about before sold a black square as a shitpost and got 16 ETH. Both have shit that fails on a functional and aesthetic level but still sells anyway. Both have companies that copy trends like crazy. Both literally have overlap too. Sneakers have started using NFTs to verify ownership, and tons of hypebeast brands have got into NFTs. And there are plenty of people into both hypebeast and NFTs, even display them in the same way, with celebrities being one of the biggest examples, which makes sense. Many attribute celebrity interest to brand deals, but they legally have to disclose that and do everywhere else. But also, celebrities are well known for having money they don't know what to do with. They all have a dozen houses, hundreds of cars, and thousands of clothes, all of which are luxury brand. It's a flex, not a brand deal. So it's more likely that NFTs are just a further extension of the flex, just like the hypebeast brands they wear. Which would also perfectly explain why the rarest and therefore most expensive traits are always the shiny ones. Keep in mind that a scam, by definition, requires misleading the buyer, but both the core tech that's all open source and everything I've shown here hid nothing. Oh, and no one was ever mad you saved their NFT. It was advertising bait that single-handedly made these apes synonymous with NFTs. It wasn't an own, you were making them rich. I tried to warn you, you didn't fucking listen. Just like hypebeasts and collectors, people know exactly how practically meaningless all these items are, and yet they buy them anyway. You can think hypebeast is stupid for this reason, you wouldn't call it a scam. But calling NFTs hypebeast would perfectly explain why monkey JPEGs are selling for 100k.
Alright, ladies and gentlemen, here we go. Crown item, oh my god, 6918. Oh my god, it's such a clean piece. Processing. Yo, let's fucking go!
Buyers are hypebeasts with huge amounts of disposable income who want to feel special by buying an intentionally scarce product because that means it's associated with things they want to be associated with. Rich people, celebrities, luxury lifestyles, and the hot new trendy popular thing. In short, they want to say they're part of the cool kids club. Like most of hypebeast, it's a flex.
Like, I know I have the cost statues in the back. I didn't know that was a hypebeast thing. Everyone's like, oh, PewDiePie's a hypebeast. I just appreciate art, okay? I just hate how they're ruined now because of these little kids, okay? Oh, it's popular, so it's cool because it's expensive.
This lines up. Today's most expensive NFTs were initially sold for comparatively nothing. So the NFT economy is collectors buying things early for cheap and not wanting to sell them, the hypebeasts who got in late but were willing to pay big to get in, investors who attempted to meet this demand by finding and buying things early with the intent to sell to the hypebeasts later, and finally scammers who tried to trick the investors into thinking they had the next big thing that they'd be able to sell to those hypebeasts. It's true there's folks in this space trying to predict what will sell later and buy early, and scammers trying to trick them into buying garbage, but detractors show this and omit everything else so it looks like that this is all there is. But spending any time in these communities show that half the folks here act far less like scammers and investors and far more like collectors and hypebeasts. Alright, so if it's not a scam and it's not destroying the environment and artists are profiting, then what the fuck? Cause, okay, here's the weird part. Twitter is seemingly very pro-artist. I show tons to prove this. Folks there love and support artists. They make support threads for artists in countries that need it. Threads on how to treat artists well and call-outs for those who don't always get tons of likes and retweets. The standards get really high too. Folks ask permission to use art even if it's just for a lock screen, and comparing an artist's work to another, even when well-meaning, is considered a faux pas. They rally for artists in the industry too. They fight hard for your rights and signal boost injustices. High-profile cases cases of art stealing always go viral. Everyone rallies behind them. Support is unanimous. Only exception was when Elon Musk posted art without credit, but it still sparked an insane shitstorm, and the comments in his defense were still the minority despite his huge fan base. So it's a good indication of how the majority of the platform feels. So if Twitter is so pro-artist, you'd think they'd rally behind NFTs for its huge potential and proven profitability for artists who try it, especially when you realize the counters to the big anti-NFT claims were easily accessible to anyone willing to dive deeper, which you'd think they do for the sake of the artists they claim to care about. The rebuttals to the environmental claims published by the same journal have been available since 2019, and convenient summary videos of it have been out since November 2021, and anyone willing to look into these communities with good faith would see immediate contradictions in the scam argument because of the way people act. And the claim that NFTs don't help artists, you can't have been interacting with NFTs and artists and not had NFT artists recommended to you by Twitter. That's how I learnt about this. It's not hidden knowledge. There are even 3 big YouTubers who are capable of acknowledging the simple nuance of artists in this space without lying about profitability, even though they were overall critical of NFTs. 2 even flat out said it was good for artists.
NFTs, alright? NFTs are this new hot thing on the market that's great for artists, I would say.
It's just opened up the ability to make a living for these people in a way that didn't exist before. And that is the amazing part of NFTs.
In fact, you had to know if you were pro-artist on Twitter, because you follow artists and tons of them tried NFTs in the last 2 years. There was ample opportunity to wonder why so many artists were getting into it and check how much they were making. In fact, they post their successes, so there's no way you didn't know. So if Twitter is so pro-artist and rebuttals are so accessible, you'd expect there to be unanimous support of NFT artists. But no. It was the complete opposite. Not only did they pretend they don't exist, as I briefly showed before and we'll get into more in a bit, but when those artists are acknowledged, my god, I have never seen such unprecedented abuse towards artists in my life. And those pro-artist folks disappeared. There's huge standalone tweets taking small posts by dicks no one agrees with saying to not treat artists that way that get thousands of retweets. Yet you will never see posts like this despite NFT artists being told to die or kill themselves that get anywhere from 0 likes to 35 likes to 170 likes to almost 1,000 likes. Nothing. And these tweets get virtually 0 pushback in the reply too. I show you artists being called vermin, scum, scumbag, disgusting human being, piece of shit, useless human being, and this isn't shit no one agrees with. This direct response to an artist calling them a useless human being, 210 likes. There are literally direct replies to NFT artists saying it's morally okay to cyberbully them that get 212 likes, and there is again 0 pushback. When I spoke out about this, an account with 70 followers literally tried to justify the abuse and got more likes than my previous reply, implying even among my followers, over half of them agree. So God only knows how many of them were just turning a blind eye to it despite acting like they cared about artists previously. I've seen an NFT artist's work get called so shit that porn would be a better use for her, and the only pushback was bruh. There could be a single positive reply to an artist switching to NFTs going, I hope you achieve your dream, that gets 1 like, and the first response will say, I hope they don't, fuck NFT supporters, that gets 89. The few times this shit gets called out, they will literally just say they deserved it and get way more likes. There was general and direct callouts to NFT artists to be ass blasted and have their careers ruined with 400 and 800 likes respectively. Even non-NFT artists get blocked just for taking commission work from crypto bros and get called brain dead just for being against small artists getting harassed just for following NFT artists. The top comment literally tried to justify it, as did quote tweets from smaller accounts that despite that got more likes. The same account implied tons of big artists spoke out against the abuse before I started researching, whose tweets I can only now assume have been deleted after getting harassed, because I can't find them now, and the account implied that it was literally justifying harassment just for being neutral on the topic. There was multiple claims from multiple artists of death threats, wishes for death, and death of loved ones, even for artists under 20k and 2k followers. There was claims of gore sent to email, talks of doxing, signups to vulgar sites. There was literally lists made of these artists. One called Crypto Losers by the account from before who was also bragging about being the NFT hunter, and another who made a Google Doc of NFT artists called Artists Not Worth Your Money or Time, who was calling out NFT artists both in general and by name, and calling them a disgrace to art. Dude wasn't even an artist himself, not that that would make it okay of course, and despite the account size, again, 0 pushback. You're not a real artist was also a very common phrase. There were tweets with 242 retweets and 5,427 likes saying NFT artists aren't real artists. That was the 3rd tweet in a chain that blew up like crazy. It's disgusting. I remember the crazy engagement on viral tweets telling folks not to send ironic memes to non-English speaking artists because they might be misinterpreted, but here, people are actually sending this shit maliciously and no one says anything. There's big posts with tons of retweets telling off people for small slights even when well-meaning, like saying an artist's work looks like another, but the same folks say nothing about right-click save jokes despite not being well-meaning. These can have hundreds of likes and not one reply calls it distasteful. Hell, no one says anything to people straight up saying they're going to steal art or showing others how to see their Patreon exclusive art for free. 44 likes, 0 pushback. But get this, if that artist then gets sick of the abuse and ostracizing and takes a spiteful tweet pressuring their mutuals to unfollow her and then mints it as an NFT, even though it's clearly a joke and it wasn't even for sale, suddenly they care about art theft again and try to cancel her for it. Over a tweet, a follow policing tweet, they acted like it was art theft. So you can tell it's the same pro-artist people, not just because they're gone in the face of the shit they used to care about, but because they use the same pro-artist rhetoric to hurt artists. Remember porn would be a better use for her? That was a reply to a tweet trying to claim NFTs are bad for artists, yet the post author ignores this even though they were talking with them. It's the same people. I've seen my own followers call out abusers, but they've literally liked tweets endorsing ass-blasting NFT artists. It's crazy. And it doesn't stop there. Any excuse to brandish NFT artists as evil is taken. In December last year, I saw among others a couple of big YouTubers brandish an NFT artist as a thief over supposedly stealing a character design for a combination of generic traits like straight bangs and water hair, as if this wasn't well within the realms of possibility to be a coincidence, especially with a bunch of other reasons that come up the second you look for proof. They brandished this girl as a thief with no proof, blasted her with thousands of abusers, and said nothing when she deactivated her main account the next day, and apart from one event about a week later, effectively remained deactivated until August this year. And you can tell it's to demonize her too, because when the alleged original artist spoke directly against sending her a hate storm, no one fucking retweeted it. It's dwarfed by the tweets brandishing her as a thief, despite many of which being from smaller accounts. The best example of how bad this can get is with the same artist. Even months after getting into NFTs, and even a month or two after this drama, she made a completely innocuous meme post on her NFT account about a drop in the price of Ether, and got blasted with 1,500 quote retweets of pure abuse. Nothing positive, no pushback, pure abuse. And this tweet was only a month or two after she made a big twit longer explaining she got into NFTs because she had multiple medical conditions and didn't want to be a burden to her family. She begged people following her to just quietly boycott and leave her in peace, and that she felt close to a breaking point, some borderline suicidal shit, and they were still abusing her this much months later. Even up to August 30th, the day before I released my video, this girl was still getting abused, which ain't an exception. One artist literally made one NFT and got so much shit off of viral tweets condemning her and follow policing her that she deleted and backed out. Didn't even sell one NFT, stopped within a month she started, but a month later she was still getting 900 retweet posts, not just trying to blacklist her, but straight up lying that she still did NFTs. And she continued to get abuse for a full year. For the record, in a number of cases the abuse is a minority, albeit a big one, but the rest is not much better. This here is the top reply to the artist who said she does NFTs because she has Crohn's and arthritis at 20 and doesn't want to be a burden to her family. All she wanted was a polite boycott and not sending constant hate, abuse, death threats, and gore to her email. The top reply ignores the hate, tells her to stop, and says she can do better. And while there are smaller replies that actually condemn the abuse, this is the only time you ever see them condemn the abuse, when it's in reply to the artist's claims of abuse, not the abuse itself, and often comes with caveats and justifications like they're only doing it because they know they were complicit in the abuse and are now feeling like they're being associated with it. There's literally abuse in these threads and nobody replies to them. And once tweets spotlighting the abuse drops off the algorithm, it starts up again, worse than ever, and folks go right back to silence. Which happened with my video too. There was about a month apiece, and now we're right back to it. That artist is still getting abused almost a year on. And if you still doubt how big this got, there were huge viral tweets with over 100,000 likes calling artists getting into NFTs stupid and embarrassing, with tweets in the same chain saying they're not real artists. To put that in perspective, this number of likes and retweets is on par with origin tweets for recent popular memes. Way too many people agree with this. To add insult, this huge tweet also acts like profitable artists can't exist after the market crashed. This is observably untrue, but neither before this or after did any of these folks ever admit these artists were making money. When folks aren't abusing artists, they're just claiming they don't exist. I show tons of tweets, sometimes with a ton of likes, claiming NFTs don't help artists. There were even 4 big YouTubers claiming the same thing, sometimes with small concessions like only already profitable artists with big platforms, or only artists who got in early.
While a few sellers legit and otherwise made off with undeniably big paydays, hundreds of thousands of artists bought in only to find that there wasn't a new, revolutionary, highly trafficked audience of digital art collectors. Instead, there was a closed market, dealing in casino chips, where the primary winners were those already connected, who already had the means to get the attention of the whales in the media, a market where participation required buying into a cryptocurrency at a rapidly fluctuating price in order to pay the minting costs to post the work where it would sit unsold.
The content of the image would probably be of minor relevance. Elon Musk could put up a finger painting and probably make $1 million off of it, while some hardworking artist that doesn't have a huge following could put up an absolute masterpiece and maybe collect 20 or 30 cents off of it.
He seems convinced now that this is the solution for small-time artists barely making any money from their work. Trouble is, the logic is entirely flawed. RIC was able to make money through already having a platform, and that's the only real scarcity at play here.
But all had to either be lying or for some reason spoke very bold absolutes as if fact without apparently stepping one foot into the community, which doesn't make sense either because again they would have been previously following artists who got into NFTs. Some even admit it. There were big YouTubers who spoke against artists they were following doing NFTs, but 4 days later made memes implying independent NFT artists don't exist. And when artists get into NFTs and put up their first auction, they're blasted with quote retweets of not just abuse, but how it's a mistake and a scam and they're gonna lose all their money. But their next post, celebrating making 40k USD, suddenly no one wants to signal boost that one. The only quote retweets are from crypto bros. Detractors didn't question their beliefs or ponder the potential for the artist they claim to care about. Nope, silence, like they don't want to draw attention to it. If you're even just curious about trying, you get gaslit by your followers into thinking it's a bad idea. Commission work, the main way artists earn money on Twitter, that folks used to say is hard work that doesn't pay enough, it's called a commission grind for a reason, well it's now the shit, and you'll be gaslit into thinking it's this amazing thing for artists that's way better and pays way more even though it doesn't and comes with way less artistic freedom, which you'd think they'd care about because of all the engagement for artists taking care of their mental health. There are viral tweets with 93k likes that just came out of nowhere acting like commissions are this amazing thing that more directly supports artists. What are you talking about? Have you tried looking? And why would you claim this so boldly if you hadn't? It's the same with Patreon. Folks offer it up like it's this revolutionary solution, like these artists didn't already have them, let alone the fact that NFTs have often made them more than commissions and Patreon combined. Literally everything is somehow a better solution. In the space of a year, I watched Twitter go from artists are overworked and underpaid to just sell stickers or get a fast food job. It looks suspicious. There's more of this exact same abuse, manipulative behavior, and vanishing of the pro-artist people in the big video, but all of this should be enough to convince you that I'm not exaggerating. This was a crazy big pattern of behavior. So next question is why the backstab? Here's my theory, and bear with me, I'll substantiate it all with proof. I think that the pro-artist crowd were actually political activists who cared about artists because they were a large group of struggling poor people that could be used as an excuse to push left-leaning policy. NFTs threw a wrench in this. Not only did it start lifting artists out of poverty and removing them as a potential excuse for it, but also it was helping them in all the wrong ways. Crypto is a concept heavily associated with the right. Bitcoin's inception came as a direct response to centralized banks, and the core feature and appeal of crypto is that it's decentralized. Inversely, centralizing is vital to many left-leaning policies, hence the term centrally planned, as in socialism. But giving government more control over people and businesses is often vital to healthcare, regulation, workers' rights, etc., and a centralized currency only helps as you can better enforce taxes and raise government spending. So crypto helping artists not only made decentralization and the right look good, it had practical consequences for left-leaning policy. Anyone active enough in left-leaning politics to realize this potentially had a motive to kill crypto. This would explain lying about anything that made it look good. Likewise, ostracizing and abusing artists pressured them to shut up where they'd otherwise want to spread the good news, which explains why artists got a disproportionate amount of the hate, which is also something I show in the video. While it's true most folks, even apolitical and folks on the right, think NFTs are stupid, because to be fair, they look pretty fucking stupid, it was the left that had the motive to be manipulative, to not speak up in spite of any claimed obligation to artists, and to lie about it in spite of any contradicting information they saw, to intentionally spread false claims that in large part resulted in everyone going from thinking it was stupid to full-on hating it. If you didn't care for NFTs, you don't really have any reason to question the narrative. Even if you saw some of these artists, you've no reason to speak out or dive deeper unless you're pro-artist or deeply involved in the crypto conversation already. I'll give you a microcosm of this. If you look at the 4 YouTubers who seemingly lied about artist profitability, and then compare it with the 3 YouTubers who were overall critical of NFTs but acknowledged these artists' existence and did not lie about profitability, or just straight up said it was good for artists, you can find a pattern. Those who claimed it effectively wasn't helping artists all have tweets implying they are highly active or radical in left-leaning politics, 2 of which I'd argue are straight-up political essayists and mention it in their videos. And if you look at the ones who approach this with nuance, I perhaps wouldn't say they're active in politics, but they're sure as hell not left-leaning. I'd say they're centrist or lean a little right. This is not me saying left bad or right good, this is me saying the only ones who were lying on this topic all had the same political incentive to do so that's probably why they were. This is not to say there wasn't left-leaning people who acted on principle, because there were, but they were a minority. Point is, when YouTubers who didn't have an active left political bias were deeply involved in this conversation, they all acknowledged the positives and didn't lie. The opposite was not true of the 4 YouTubers who effectively claimed it wasn't helping artists at all. One of these groups seems to have a bias. I've got more proof for this, but first, this all only makes sense if the vast majority of the pro-artist crowd were left-leaning too. The folks who had the obligation to speak out would have no doubt done so if not for the political incentive not to, which seems to be the case. Tons of pro-artist posts have policy mixed in with them that's heavily associated with the left. UBI, minimum wage, free healthcare, concepts like industry crunch come up a lot, and things like unionization are always the solution. There was even a socialist Twitter account that spun the Elon Musk not crediting an artist story into wages are theft for 1,000 likes. Some of the biggest posts simply pin artist problems on capitalism not in part but as a whole, so by definition the implied solution is move left. Likewise, terms like overworked and underpaid imply a correct amount as opposed to the natural result of the market, morals aside, and so implies government intervention. Even the apolitical pro-artist posts are reminiscent of left-leaning ideas. Things like charging what you're worth evoke ideas of your boss stealing the value of your labor, and encouraging mental health and breaks feels like workers' rights talks. That's not to say artists who post this kind of thing are even political, it's just a topic that affects them, but the folks who are upvoting it to the moon, that's what I wonder about. Because this is inversely true of the opposite side of politics. Like hustling and grinding and pulling yourself up by your bootstraps are not political concepts either, but they're more associated with the right. And while you may see individual artists say on the commission grind, you'll never see pro-grind culture tweets be liked into the stratosphere, let alone outright endorsements of capitalism or right-leaning policies. Now, by itself, pro-artist folks pushing left-leaning policy is fine. If you care about artists, obviously you want to help them, and this might be the way to do it. But NFTs revealed their true colors. There's tons of tweets that mention artists, NFTs, and then capitalism in a negative context. There's also tons of pro-artist tweets specifically about NFTs that would demand left-associated policy instead of NFTs, especially when artists, some even highly active leftist artists, were like, we don't even like NFTs, life as an artist is just fucking hard. A new potential solution appeared, but suddenly pro-artist folk were like, no, don't do that even though it's working right now. Instead, wait like 4 years for your next election, vote for left-leaning policies, and hope to God everyone else does the same. There's even big YouTubers whose whole shtick is to talk about admittedly legitimate problems in the animation industry, but lo and behold, the solution is implied to be socialism.
Call me a socialist, but I believe that with the overseas anime industry making so much money, localization teams, including translators, editors, timers, they should all be entitled to paychecks that reflect the amount of money they bring in.
What do they think of NFTs? Oh, of course, they hate them and are completely incapable of even a smidgen of nuance on the topic. Even one of the big hit pieces on this topic talks about OpenSea's fantasies for starving artists in the same shot where he rejects a future with capitalism and crypto and says, we need something better.
The whole thing, from OpenSea fantasies for starving artists to the buy-in for pay-to-earn games, it's the same hollow, exploitative pitch as MLMs, by people who looked at 2008, who looked at the system as it exists, but concluded that the problems with capitalism were that it didn't provide enough opportunities to be the boot. Our systems are breaking or broken, straining under neglect and sabotage, and our leaders seem at best complacent, willing to coast out the collapse. We need something better.
Subtle. So when you combine this with how the abuse utilized pro-artist rhetoric and how the pro-artist folks didn't speak out against the abuse, ostracizing or lies despite a precedent of doing just that, you get suspicious. And you check the accounts of who's doing it, and there is an incredibly high correlation of the same politics. All the popular hit piece articles come from folks highly active in left-leaning politics. two of which couldn't even help themselves from mentioning capitalism in a negative context in the article themselves, which is also true of the two big YouTube hit pieces.
Capitalism, 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 late stage capitalism.
Anti-capitalist, hyper-capitalist, rewards the wealthy.
Capitalism, capitalism.
Hyper-capitalist,
large corporations.
Anarcho-capitalist, the corporatization of everything. Anti-capitalist, with capitalism.
The same was true of most of the abuse, with the biggest abusers willing to sacrifice the most time on this always having a clear left-wing bias. A ton of the tweets that say NFTs don't help artists also mention capitalism in a negative context. And when I looked at the artists who were abusing or ostracizing other artists or otherwise claiming it wasn't helping them, every single one of them I'd infer is left-leaning, and almost every single one of them was highly active or highly radical, which adds up. While I think most artists were neutral and no doubt just scared to speak up, the ones willing to sacrifice their colleagues and a potential good thing for them were folks who most likely valued their politics far more than their ability to make money from their art. Many of these artists will act like it's all about the artist when they're against NFTs, but literally the same folks will call out other artists just for being silent during BLM. It's clear their left-wing beliefs outweigh their desire to be nice to other artists. But this isn't the only correlation. I can also tell the pro-artist group were actually political activists, because this exact same tactic of acting like you love and want to protect a certain group, but then abusing, ostracizing, and erasing the politically inconvenient members of it is a pattern of behavior you can track on the left side of politics across every minority group. I show tons of cases and claims of the left side of politics acting the same way they did with artists to every minority group the second they go against the majority left opinion.
And this is why I don't buy into a lot of liberal media when it comes to like, we're for minorities. You're not. You're just there for them when it's convenient.
Always the most pro-black, but you're the ones that shit on us. The first one, the minute we don't agree with you.
If you switch black with artists and disregard that just using NFTs isn't necessarily an opinion, it lines up perfectly. Half the folks from this section of the video aren't even friends of the right. Regardless of whether you are a conservative, libertarian, centrist, or even a leftist, with one ideological difference, you get this treatment. I show you the folks who say it should be okay to call Dave Chappelle the N-word. I show you all the people who actually did with Clarence Thomas after Roe v. Wade, or how George Takei called him a clown in blackface years ago. I talk about Daphne, a trans woman and friend of Dave Chappelle who defended him online, and then a week later, after apparently receiving a giant harassment campaign, killed herself, which wouldn't even be the first example of someone attempting suicide because they were bullied into it with left-wing rhetoric as a justification. There's similar claims just from the last few months, like a libertarian trans woman claiming the police has showed up to her house multiple times now, and that her fairly nuanced opinion on HRT with kids was going to ruin her night. On issues like vaccines, where there's a more significant divide between blacks and the left, many seem to describe a similar kind of backstabbing. ABBA and Preach are fairly centrist commentators. Sometimes they hit right, sometimes left. But ABBA had a whole rant on this, for not just left in general, but specific YouTubers too.
One thing that's hilarious about folks on left, right? The right folks, they don't even like to acknowledge a lot of history when it comes to minorities. But left folks, they claim, right? Riots come about. BLM comes about. They're like, I understand why black folks are mistrusting of the government. Considering your history, it makes sense to me. I understand why even if I don't condone it. Then this pandemic comes wrong, and they're like, you fucking anti-vax, why would you not? Do you not know the history of minorities and healthcare system in America? I do think vaccines are the way forward, but I cannot sit here and act like you guys are not fucking giant hypocrites for not acknowledging the very valid reasons why these people are protesting or against it today. I just don't get that. So don't get up here and post your black squares, say all this bullshit about how you support this or that, but then when it comes to what they're going through, you didn't even want to do a modicum of research. You wanted to label them a piece of shit. You want to say you want to kill your neighbors. You don't give a fuck. It's hard.
DeFranco isn't even the only one. There were other big YouTubers who were all Black Lives Matter, all cops are bastard, who flipped out of nowhere and became very hostile to blacks without a shred of the sympathy they showed before. It's very common, and it happens with trans people too.
My issue as a trans person is the fact that you, a guy that isn't super well versed on trans shit, brought on a known transphobe knowing he might bring up transphobic shit. You aren't exactly a Vosh at trans debates.
I hope that the rest of your life is as horrible as it is every single day, okay? There you go. Suck my dick. I despise you. I despise you more than anything else on the planet. You are fucking cancer. You are just a trans person. Sorry, you don't know what the fuck you're talking about.
All of this lines up with concepts that have been around for years. Popular black thought leaders like Martin Luther King and Malcolm X were pointing out very similar concepts back in the 60s, though they often limited it to just whites.
I think there are many whites who act friendly toward Negroes, who usually poses as the friend who actually differs from the white conservative in the same way that the fox differs from the wolf. Their appetite is the same. Their motives are the same. It's only their mannerisms and methods that differ.
But just like how there are radical left artists abusing other artists, the same concept seems to be true of any in-group.
It's funny how the most SJW motherfuckers, especially from the black community, talking about community, we have to be, you have to not, we have to not, they're the first one to separate you, or you're not black. They're gonna dictate how the you should act as a black person. They go out and say the most outlandish shit and call you all type of name. Traitor. It's always you motherfuckers that do that. Always the most pro-black, but you're the ones that shit on us. The first one, the minute we don't agree with you, you're like, oh my God, you must not be, shut the fuck up.
Remember how many times abusers told artists they weren't real artists, or otherwise tried to take away their artist card? It's the same thing. And you really can't say it's not a pattern. I mean, a sitting president did this.
If you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, then you ain't black.
The malicious assumptions about your intentions is a big part of this too. All the black guys I show get called coon, grifter, pandering, Uncle Tom, race traitor, like it's impossible to believe anything not strictly left-leaning while black, which is wildly hypocritical. If you care about a minority group, you could at the very least take each individual at their word and not make malicious assumptions about their intentions. Half my examples are from this year with big creators, like Gideon going to America's most racist town, not thinking it that racist, and then having left commentators immediately try to apply a bias to explain why the black guy doesn't agree with them.
I mean, I know Gideon doesn't give a shit because he's like, you know, he's a content creator first. Like, that's what...
I mean, no, I do give a shit.
What he's always worried about is, you know, making fucking clickbait stuff and doing comedy or whatever. It doesn't really matter what the, like, message is overall. But that's not how this works. Like, you know, isn't just done...
The video is 2 minutes. He's in the video 2 minutes and 34 seconds.
Even Dave Chappelle, who voted for Hillary Clinton, said he got called an Uncle Tom just for saying he voted for the lesser of two evils.
All these black people call me all kinds of Uncle Toms and shit. I should tell you, buddy, this is a very serious allegation from one black to another.
This happens with every minority race, anyone LGBT who criticizes the community. If you're a Republican trans woman, you get big videos made about you about how you're lying to yourself without a shred of evidence. It even happens with people with disabilities, with prominent left voices immediately scrolling tweet history to demonize and explain why they disagree. These aren't cherry-picked nobodies. Big creators do this because the majority are cool with it, just like with artists. A black justice can make a ruling on something not even related to skin color, and Reddit will equate him to a black-hating, white-loving slave for 27.4k upvotes. That's an insane assumption to make about someone who used to be a black nationalist, a fan of Malcolm X, and explains how he makes his rulings in plain English. None of them being, oh, well, I just really love white people and I just want to follow their orders.
The Constitution has very strict limits, in my opinion, on the use of race and sex categories. It says citizenship and person. And I think we have to be very careful that we're not locking in precedents that in the long run will do greater harm.
It's a gross assumption to make about someone from a group of people you claim to care about. And just like with artists, it's a very large number of people that seem to think it's okay. And just like the pro-artist people, they pretend to care at the same time, like bragging about Clarence Thomas having his credit card stolen, and then in the very next tweet being like, elevate black voices, bitch, which ones? And just like artists, there are plenty from the in-group that think this is fucked up, but you never hear from them because those voices aren't elevated to make it look like there is unanimous agreement within that group, despite being completely untrue. And just like how black commentators get called panderer or grifter to explain their opinions, big artists got called greedy scammers who'd sell their family for a buck. It all has the same implication, that if you're part of X identity, you cannot believe Y. Which is why, if they can get away with it, they just pretend you don't exist in the first place. The erasure of politically inconvenient artists also happens with politically inconvenient minorities. Like when folks with a platform talk to black libertarians, they focus on skin color, but when they talk about them to their audience, suddenly they're just libertarian. That same black libertarian went on to make his own comic, and he got blacklisted from comic subreddits.
Again, I'm willing to bet money that you guys spend a lot of time in this mod talking about elevate black voices, my racisms, and black creatives, and all this stuff. And the minute you got one that simply had maybe a slightly different political position than what you may have approved of, you took issue with it. Because it's not like this company is projecting or presenting some like hate speech or anything remotely related to this. They know that. It's right there. It's public. Everybody can press play.
Another example is one YouTuber who's trying to introduce economics from a left perspective to a wider audience, who not only went 20 minutes calling economics racist while only ever showing non-white economists that agreed with him, but then also made absolute statements about what economists must believe if they're not white.
Some individuals may have a preference for white people, but this means they miss out on black customers and employees and therefore will be competed out of the market. It's quite a compelling vision because you don't have to do or advocate anything if you just believe that markets will make racism go away. Except if you're not white, you can't believe the theory because it's being disproved in front of you every second of every day.
But the exact same belief he's referring to is also held by the most famous living black economist that's weirdly never even alluded to in the video. While small commentators or people only big in niche professions like NFTs or economics are easy to hide, even with figures whose existence you can't just erase like Dave Chappelle, you can still see the pattern. They just opt to hide small individual details instead of the person as a whole. Literally, the first article that comes up when you search for Daphne's story completely omits the harassment she got before her suicide and instead attributes her suicide to trans violence statistics, which they blamed Chappelle's rhetoric for. Oh, and God forbid you detransition. I showed an example just from June. Not only do they abuse you and speak for your intention, they try to report the tweet and get it censored, and they succeed. Speaking of, that libertarian trans girl, her account's now suspended. I don't even know when or why, but I can make a guess. For political animations, they always draw tons of diversity on the left, but never on the right. This in spite of statistics that show they do exist. Even for Trump, 36% of Hispanics voted for him, even 12% of black men voted for him. That's not insignificant, it's a decent chunk, but in spite of this, Twitter tries to imply they don't exist by reposting the exact same photo of the white couple in the Blacks for Trump shot, as well as a few others, every couple of months, for years now, to tons of likes. But they exist. You'll find their opinions just by searching it up.
Because I was doing pretty good. But I realized that was because of Trump. The reason I was doing pretty good last year because of Trump. Because the Democrats never gave me shit. I don't have the luxury to worry about freaking Roe versus Wade. I don't have the luxury to worry about that. I'm too busy trying to keep my family fed.
And they acknowledge themselves that people pretend they don't exist. They also have the exact same claims of abuse you find everywhere else.
People tell me to bleach my skin, kill myself, you're a coon, you're Uncle Tom.
The only difference between all this and NFT artists is it's not even about opinions. You could be a radical left NFT artist who hates NFTs and are just trying to not starve, and it wouldn't matter. There is literally no situation where it's okay. It doesn't matter if you need it, it doesn't matter if you hate it, don't use it, and just want to add nuance. It doesn't matter if you otherwise have all their politics. You still get abuse on NFT related posts, even ones where you said you were semi-suicidal. Will this story ever go viral on Twitter like all these ones? Not even close. There is no situation where it's okay, because crypto at its very core was at odds with the pro-artist folks, because they don't care about artists. They never cared about artists. They cared about having a political cudgel, and crypto got in the way of it. So they backstabbed artists. It's okay to disagree. It's okay to not like crypto. There are plenty of even artists who don't like crypto. I don't want to portray this without some level of nuance. Simply disagreeing does not make a backstab. But acting like you care so much about artists while abusing them, being complicit in that abuse, lying about them and erasing them from existence, making malicious assumptions about their motives, dismissing their struggles and giving zero benefit of the doubt to their individual situation, actively trying to ostracize them and pressuring others to do the same, or even to some extent just retracting your own support while being pro-artist, all while not making any attempt to check if the justification for such extreme actions was undisputed, let alone inaccurate. That is a backstab. For the specifics, extra evidence, extra clarifications, rebuttals to potential counter-arguments, how this fits into my current copyright stance, and me getting very, very fucking angry at a bunch of YouTubers I am ashamed to share a community with, please watch the full 8 hours. And please support artists.